are good to go.
All righty. Well, good afternoon and welcome everyone to this week's edition of the Black Health Trust program. My name is Michelle and I'm coming to you from Los Angeles. I'm your host for today, and the discussion for today will be moderated by the distinguished Dr. Randall Maxey, who is Chief Medical Officer of Advanced Community Medical Care Corporation here in LA. The mission of the Black Health Trust is to provide credible insights from our community of health experts to best serve our communities of color with a coalition of leading and longstanding Black medical professionals across a diverse spectrum of disciplines, and to offer unvarnished opinions and insights into our physical and mental health during these very challenging times. I want to share a few housekeeping items with you. And I'd like you to know to please be advised that this video conference is live and being recorded presently on different public platforms such as Facebook Live, and that participation on the call is completely voluntary. If you choose to participate on this voluntary call and prefer not to have your image and likeness displayed, there are visual and audio settings on your device that you can control to block your picture and mute your voice. Everyone's audio is being muted initially by our technician, Simon. We ask that you please remain muted until the host or facilitator asks you to contribute in order to minimize the distraction of any background noise. So please check and make sure that your device is on mute until called upon to speak, and then once again, place your device back on mute when you're done speaking. As for the chat room, if you have any questions, you can enter them in the chat box, but please limit your questions to 2 questions per topic being addressed at a time. And please do not use the forum to advertise or promote your products as that it's distracting. Understand that there may not be sufficient time to get to all the questions during the call, but we will do our best. I'd like for you to know that you must be advised that the information communicated on this call is not deemed to be medical or legal advice, and you should always consult your own medical or legal professional for advice pertaining to your particular situation and needs. So Black Health Trust needs you to continue bringing our community outstanding programming, critical and timely information. Please visit www.blackhealthtrust.org to offer your support. Visit the website to learn more about our programming, how to support, volunteer, and donate so that we can get this information out to as many people as possible. Again, visit our website, blackhealthtrust.org, to donate, and make sure to stay safe out there. We do take credit cards and Cash App and other methods of payments for donations. We will have a member of the steering committee talk more about the Black Health Trust later in the program. And I want to thank in advance the Black Health Trust Steering Committee, our virtual administrative assistants, our Zoom technicians, and all the people behind the scenes for their time and efforts to make this programming possible. And we want to give a big welcome to all our distinguished physicians and special guest ministers today. We thank you for sharing your valuable time, your information, and educated insights with us. Your participation and support help to empower our communities of color, and this is critical to our present and future well-being as a people. Welcome again, everyone, to the Black Health Trust Weekly Program. Please grab your coffee, tea, and lean in. And Dr. Maxey, please do us the honor of moderating the program.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I'd also like to welcome and introduce my co-moderator, Dr. Barbara Naybert Stevens, who is a graduate of Tufts New England Medical Center and also Harvard University, and holds other graduate degrees. I say she runs, but she is an officer in a company that handles managed care in the state of Tennessee. And she is a pediatrician and a recent board member of the National Medical Association. Welcome for working with me, Dr. Naybert Stevens. How are you today?
Thank you so much, Dr. Maxey. I am wonderful, and I am so happy to be here with you and all of our guests and our audience. This has been an eventful week. I don't think we've had an uneventful week in several months, but I think that if our audience will stay with us and listen to the information that we bring each week, they will find themselves in a position to protect themselves and to not just survive, but actually to thrive. And with that, I turn it back over to you.
Very good. We have several special guests, but a really special guest that I'm going to ask to speak for a few moments is Miss Jacqueline Hengan. I met her several months ago through my pastor, Dr. Michael Fisher, and she happens to be the wife of a very prominent rabbi in the Los Angeles area. And she has been working with something that is very close to my heart, which is stem cells research, regenerative medicine. And I'm going to ask her to speak for a few minutes. Ms. Hankin, and I wish I could also have the rabbi on because I'm very interested not only in what you have to say about stem cells, but we have some serious spiritual issues that I want to bring to front later today. Go ahead, Ms. Hankin.
Thank you so much. It's an honor, and I know for my husband, he'd be honored to speak as well. Thank you, and good morning or afternoon. It has been a privilege for me to get to know Dr. Maxey over the past couple months, like he said, through the relationship with Pastor Michael Fisher, whom we're most grateful for. And we're grateful to Dr. Maxey and the Black Health Trust for building this relationship and its support together for Prop 14, which is the Californian Stem Cell Research Treatments and Cures Initiative. Again, I am honored to participate in the weekly calls when I can and learn so much from each and every one of the experts on the panels. Today, I want to speak to you briefly. It is obviously our 48 plus 72 hours to get out our vote, and this one is super important, as Dr. Maxey said. We will continue to support and accelerate the development of new treatments and cures through the establishment of the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. We are seeking to renew that funding, and the Institute to date has supported over 90 clinical trials with 4,000 plus patients enrolled or expected to be, published nearly 3,000 peer-reviewed medical discoveries, trained nearly 1,300 students from community colleges and Cal State University system through the Bridges program, and provided internships to nearly 450 high school students through our Spark program, which specifically selects students from undeserved communities with fewer opportunities. This stuff is crucial and vital that it continues to take place, most particularly in helping to save lives and change medicine. There's 3 promising clinical trials already in progress for sickle cell disease and 2 additional translational studies that are advancing toward trials. There is a landmark agreement between the NIH and the California Institute to co-fund and accelerate gene therapy and development programs for sickle cell, 2 FDA-approved cancer drug treatments, and so many other powerful, important discoveries and treatments. SCID disease, which otherwise used to be known as, bubble baby disease, has been cured by a research scientist through CIRM funding right here in UCLA. There's over 50 babies alive today as a result of that research. There's an enormous amount of effort towards funding treatments, cures, and vaccines underway for COVID. And it is just absolutely vital, as Dr. Maxey knows, that this, and Pastor Fisher and so many others within the community know that the essential necessity of passing Prop 14 on November 3rd. There's so much more to say. I'm grateful for your time. I don't want to take more time. I will put my email address in the chat and direct you to the website. I cannot thank you enough. I'm available for questions, answers, anything that you might have. And yes, on 14, to cures, to health, to healing, to hope, and to building a marvelous future together with accelerating medicine. So thank you very, very much.
We thank you so much for bringing this valuable information. I've been doing stem cells regenerative medicine for the past several years. Just Friday, I think I treated 10 patients, but I treated them in Norwalk. Right now, this treatment is not covered by most insurance, certainly not Medicare and Medicaid. So we find a lot of people treated in the areas around Los Angeles, around Inglewood, and it's usually a cash payment. But the research is really growing by leaps and bounds. We're using it to decrease renal failure in some cases. I'm going to ask Dr. Morris Salafu about that later. Dr. Motley and I are involved in an IND to decrease the rate of decline of stage 3 and 4 renal failure. but it's something that usually escapes our community. And talking with Ms. Hangen and her group, we've told them, and they said, we want 20% of that $5.5 billion to be earmarked for our community. And they said it, right? So we'll have money for research and things to help our community as well. And they've been delightful to work with. Thank you very much, Ms. Hankin. Thank you so much. We usually start our meeting with a report of the cases in the United States, and I'm going to still do that. We've got a total of 9,105,230 cases in the United States as of today. There are 80,933 new cases. There are 551,403 cases in the last 7 days, and the total deaths are 229,932, with there being 823 new deaths. This pandemic is real. It's not red, it's not blue, it's not affiliated with any type of political party. It is something that is there, and we need to protect ourselves. While we're shut in, we also need to be mindful of what are the dangers of being shut in and how you protect yourself, and Dr. Motley is going to discuss that. And we also know that this disease is still very transmittable, and Dr. Salafu is going to discuss that issue. We have a problem with excess mortality in our community. Excess mortality denotes a temporary increase in the death rate or the number of deaths in a given population at a given time. This is also known as excess mortality. It is generally attributable to some environmental phenomenon, such as heat waves, cold spells, epidemics, pandemics, or war. We have that going on. And guess where the excess deaths are occurring most? In communities of color, often because we represent the tip of the spear. It is also clear that those of us in healthcare are often at that tip of the spear, working in hospitals, working in environments where we're exposed to COVID and other dangers. And we have experienced a number of recent deaths. And I would ask you all to hold health professionals high in your prayers, because there are many ladies and men who are affected by these problems. I'd like to know if the two other special guests is Reverend Smith and on.
I believe I see Reverend Robinson.
Reverend Robinson, welcome. How are you?
You need to unmute your device. There you go.
Can you hear us now?
We can hear you now. Let me
Okay,
introduce
wonderful.
this is a little bit unusual, but a week or so ago, we started hearing conversations from young Black men who were not interested in voting in the upcoming election. And we know that it is important that all segments of our community vote and have an impact. Some years ago, I went to a church, and after altar call, I noticed a number of red handkerchiefs and blue handkerchiefs on the altar, representing a number of young men in the city of Compton that had given their lives to God. Now, for those of you who don't know what red and blue are, maybe it'll come out in the next few minutes. But we've had a number of our entertainers saying that they were going to work for certain types of politics that many of us think are dangerous. I was inspired to ask these two gentlemen one who was previously red and one who was previously blue, who are both now men of God, to have 3 to 5 minutes total to speak to us just a moment about why it's important that we participate as a community in this election and vote. Reverend Smith, you're first.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you guys doing today?
We're good.
Doing all right, doing well.
Wonderful. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm truly honored. It is actually a privilege. I would never thought that I would be on a Zoom call. In all actuality, I didn't even know really what a Zoom call was till a few minutes ago. I've heard about it, but thank you. No, I just want to tell you a quick story. I'm going to be very brief because I know the time is at hand. I was over in the neighborhood, and Auntie Maxine, what we call her, in the hood, in the community. Auntie Maxine came over with a bus, and she wanted people to get on the bus and go vote. She was there for about an hour, hour and a half, and people began to take pictures with her and began to conversate with her, and I just took time to go introduce myself and let her know that my life had changed drastically, and I now had become concerned about my people. She was willing to pay people to get on the bus to go vote. She had this big bus. Everybody was there on the corner, but nobody would take the money to get on the bus to go vote. Now, you had people there that were panhandling and asking for money and just basically hanging out. And she was offering to pay $10 to $15 for them to take a short bus ride to go vote. Nobody did, and that was so discouraging to me. It was so disheartening to me. And it's at that point that I knew something had to change in the community and in the hood, per se. I remember a time being an ex-convict myself that I didn't think I could vote. So voting didn't matter. I wasn't a political person. I didn't care about the views. I didn't care about much of anything. But the time came when I was able to vote. I began to get ballots, and they began to mail me literature regarding the position, the political position. And it changed my life because I then felt like I was really a citizen. I felt like I had come to a point in life that I never thought I would reach, where something mattered besides gang banging and drugs and violence and crime. So I'm just saying to my people, anybody, especially young folk, especially brothers who've been down and brothers who've been incarcerated and been in this real struggle, because we all know the struggle is real. It may be different on Capitol Hill, but it's real where I come from. It's important that you go out and vote. It's important that you let your voice be heard. And the only way you can let your voice be heard is to go to the polls. I guarantee once you do it once, you're going to do it for the rest of your life. You're going to feel different about yourself, and you're going to feel different about your community. I know it for a fact. Give it a try. We need you. The only way we can change situations in the hood is that we get an opportunity to vote. That opportunity is coming up tomorrow, I believe. I've already voted, as a matter of fact. So I thank you for this time. God bless you all. Stay safe, stay blessed, and most of all, today, stay healthy.
Okay. Mr. Robbins, give us a few minutes.
All right, how you doing? My name is Curtis Robinson. How you guys doing?
We're good.
First of all, I'd like to give his honor to God and praise his holy name for allowing us to be able to speak.
Amen.
Second of all, I would like to say we complain about a lot of things in the community as community activists and as the community period in general. And we talk about the 3 strikes law, how unfair the police are, how unfair the police treat us. But yet and still, in order to make change, we have to get out there and vote. We got to vote the people in who will serve our purpose as as our community requires. As the requirement, the needs of our community, we will have to vote the people in that serve the community.
Real talk, bro. Real
Not
talk.
just the needs of the community, but for the community itself. I grew up on the blue side, but that's irrelevant right now. Right now, it's about people. I've learned to change that. My focus of where I once was, I was lost, but now I'm found.
Amen.
You know, now that I'm found, I got to help someone else to be found.
Amen.
And we have to voice our opinion. We have to voice our opinion in what we would like to have the community and have done in the community. What can help the community is we have to get out there and vote. The main thing is we have to come together.
Amen.
Once we come together, we can figure out, because knowing is half the battle. Once we know, then we can come together and then we can do something about some of the situations and the issues that plague our community.
Amen, bro.
Yes.
I thank you, gentlemen, both very much. You're both dear friends of mine. James, I've known a long time. We go way back. We won't talk about it, but thank you so much. And listen, this is good. We do need to go and vote. We got to change our situation. I'm going to ask a very distinguished gentleman to join you two distinguished gentlemen, just talk about why we need to vote. The chairman of our advisory committee, Mr. Carl Brooks. I don't know if he's red or blue, but he's a powerful gentleman. Mr. Brooks.
Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
It was such a privilege to witness the two brothers, Crips and Bloods, and they're recognizing the importance of voting. As Randall said, I've been a corporate executive. I ran the group of the top Black African-American executives in Fortune 500 companies, but I grew up in South Philly. I grew up in the hood, and I was as proud of being from South Street as I was doing anything else in life. And to hear you brothers talk, it's a blessing. It's an absolute blessing. We're in a crazy situation in this country, and we're dealing with three difficult things at the same time. The first is the coronavirus. It doesn't care where we're from. It don't care if I'm from South Street or Wall Street. It could care less, and it's really having a serious impact in our communities, as Randall stated earlier. And then we got an economic situation because Wall Street has said, because they don't have their act together and because unemployment and all those things are going the wrong way. So you see the stock market is tanking. It's going down and down and down. And we haven't seen this since 2008, anything like this. And then we got this continuing assault from police departments across the country that are taking young brothers and sisters out. I'm from Philly, as I stated, and the brother that was just killed last week was the nephew of one of the guys that grew up with me in South Philly. And we were talking about that, and he was devastated by that. They should have sent some people to deal with his mental health, but they bring two guys that each shot him 7 times apiece. At the same time, the same thing is happening in Washington, D.C. So they've been demonstrating and marching, and so it's crazy. I've never seen in 70 years on the planet, I've never seen anything close to this where 3 major things are happening at the same time. We don't have a choice. We've got to vote as though our lives depend on it. And if you're not concerned about yourself, you got to do it for your children, your grandchildren. And like I said, my son is out there in California. My daughter's a doctor here. We're talking, they got us on lockdown. We can't go nowhere. And it's a good thing because they care so much about us that they want to make sure that me and my wife are safe and healthy. So you brothers, I can't even put it into words to tell you how happy I am to see 2 brothers like yourselves in front of us doing what you're doing, because at one point in time, everybody was worried about me, but everything turned out fine. I was running 2 Fortune 500 companies. I've done all those things, but what you guys are doing and showing is that we can mature and do the things that we need to do. The second point, I appreciate you guys. And when I come out to California to see my son, I'm gonna spend some time with you brothers because I love what you're doing. I love the changes that you've made in your lives.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you guys. The other issue that I wanted to speak about very briefly is the need to gain the economics to do what we got to do. When Randall had the vision, when Randall had the vision to get started on this, you know, it was a dream. He needed to put together a coalition of people. He needed to put together doctors. He's done a masterful job of having a vision of ensuring that our community has access to the greatest information that could impact our lives. And when I ran ELC, which is the Top Blacks, I used to talk about the baddest brothers and sisters on the planet, and all of them were in this group. When you talk about that in the medical fields, those baddest brothers and sisters are in the NMA, they're in the Black Health Trust, they're doing the things that we need to do. In order to keep this program rolling in a very, very professional way, we've got to get funding. And we're working on some grants from some different companies, major Fortune 500 companies and others. We've expanded. I've sent some stuff out to ELC to make sure that all those corporations know what we're doing. But we've got to get the financial support to take this to the next level. And, you know, speaking to 5,000 to 10,000 people on a weekly basis, which we've done, we got to take this even higher. We got to be talking to millions of people on a weekly basis, and we got to just take that to the next level. So we need help. We need financial help. We need our members, our listeners to donate. Go online at blackhealthtrust.com and .org and get the information and make a contribution. There is no limits, how small, how large. We're not telling you got to do $100 or $1,000. Do what you can do, but show that you care about this so we can keep this online.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate everything that you guys have done. I will follow up with you guys and thank you guys for participating. But for our audience, please help us by voting, and then please help us by donating to the Black Health Trust.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother. No problem. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you much,
Hello.
Curtis Robinson. We're going to go to our program. I'm going to introduce our speaker, who is Dr. Cecil Motley. Dr. Motley is both an MD as well as a PhD. He has a PhD in biomedical and electrical engineering. He has over 45 years of experience in electro engineering and biomedical engineering and medical device development. He is a graduate of the University of Houston and the University of Southern California. He has numerous patents and is a specialist in artificial intelligence. He's a machine intelligence and deep learning neural networks. He has 20 years of experience with ultraviolet light-based systems and devices, and he is currently the CEO of Cardiometric Medical Systems. I heard something on TV about these two ladies, one of whom recently died at 101 years old. They made a movie about these two Black ladies who, with their brains alone, not computers, did all the computation for NASA to land the ships on the moon. Dr. Motley is of that crew. Dr. Motley, please make your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Maxey. A few weeks ago, you recall that I presented how ultraviolet light could help us fight COVID-19. That's a part of the electromagnetic spectrum, right on the right side of visible light. So today, I'm going to continue talking about the electromagnetic spectrum, but this time I'm going to give you the health issues associated with using it and being in its environment. I'm going to now share my screen. Okay. That's a picture of the electromagnetic spectrum that we're all familiar with. Everything from gamma rays, X-rays, the ultraviolet that I spoke about several weeks ago, visible light, the thermal light, the microwave ovens, radios, and far, far to the left of this, power lines. Yes, power lines. That's the kind of hidden and unspoken electromagnetic radiation that no one really wants to talk about, especially the energy companies. The types of electromagnetic radiation are non-ionizing and ionizing. The ionizing is generally considered the dangerous ones. That's your X-rays, your gamma rays, your ultraviolet lights at high intensities, and they require special equipment and is equivalent to PPE to work with. The non-ionizing radiation is more what we're accustomed to being around without any type of protective gear. And that goes from the microwave ovens all the way down to the power lines. I'm sure you've seen this picture before. In your neighborhood or other people's neighborhoods, the power poles and all the lines stringing from them, well, they form an enormous source of electromagnetic radiation. And they usually come in two forms. The form you see here, and by the way, these lines extend into our homes. So they're not only just hanging out here on poles, these lines end up in our homes. And they have a similar effect, although not as intense, in our homes. I'm sure you're familiar with these giant towers that house the grid, our electrical grid. These towers can be 200 or 300 feet high, and most important, they can have voltages up to 765 kilovolts. That's a lot of power. And that amount of power and the associated loads placed on it creates a magnetic field. And that magnetic field is the source of the problems with these power lines on biological entities. This picture, as you see, 50 meters from these poles, you can see increased cancers, stunted growth, and increased triglycerides. Now, here's a very, very unfortunate thing about the placement of these towers. The land is cheap. The power companies will almost give it to you because they have these easements and have acquired the land. Frequently, schools and other nonprofit organizations will place buildings or facilities on this land. And that places the occupants of these facilities in a fair amount of danger. Now, the power companies don't want to discuss this. They will fight you tooth and nail to say, oh, this isn't hurting anybody. However, in the 80s, studies were done, and here's a horrible thing they found, that nearly 15% of all childhood cancers result from heavy exposure to EMF radiation from the overhead power lines. That's terrible. And remember, in the case of schools, these kids are there most of the day, and they're being exposed to this amount of radiation. As you go away from the towers, you can see the different effects that have been observed. And even at the 2,000 meter distance, stunted growth has been observed. Now let's talk about something also associated with the power lines. I know most of you have experienced or heard about these smart meters. These are meters that read your power consumption. They're located on your building or home or whatever uses the energy. And they transmit that data to the power company. The operative word is they transmit it. A meter reader does not have to come out and read these meters. It's automatically transmitted. You can go online and look at your daily power consumption. And the power company really likes this because it reduces the number of personnel they have required to carry on their business. But look at that graph on the left. In the far left corner in blue, that's a relative amount of radiation that is experienced from a cell phone. And it's a fair amount, but significantly low compared to the meters. 3 feet from those meters, you see this 40 times amount of energy required to transmit that data back to the power companies. At 10 feet away from those meters, it's still a significant amount of radiation from the meters. Now, many companies are being sued because of these meters, because individuals are claiming that they've had harm, physical harm, in the form of various growths or other things we'll discuss later because of these meters. So many states are saying, okay, you can opt out of using these meters. You can call your power company and say, come and get this smart meter and replace it with the old motor-driven meter that doesn't transmit. But that meter requires someone to come out and physically read it. We opted out quite a while ago when I found out how much radiation these things were putting out. And I recommend that if you haven't already, if you sleep or are close to these meters in your home or facility, I would opt out and go back to the old mechanical meter. Now, Dr. Maxey told me that I need to really explain this. This isn't obvious. This is a square law effect of radiation. And forget all of the math and all the geometric dilution issues that describe what's going on. It's simply this. The farther you are away from the sources of radiation, the less energy is applied to your body. And the key word is applied to your body. Your body absorbs electromagnetic radiation. And in the non-ionizing case, it raises the temperature. It is a heat source. So the farther away you are from the source of the radiation, the less dense it is. When you reduce the density, you reduce the amount of energy that actually is absorbed by the human body. So keep that in mind. If I'm far away from the source, I'm not in as much danger. But if I'm right up on the source, I could be in danger. And an example of that is kids putting their face to the microwave ovens watching the food cook. Okay, back to the power line induced illnesses. That's a list of the illnesses that have been long studied and attributed to power lines. The power companies don't want to even remotely discuss this because the only solution for them is to bury the power lines. And they can't bury the power lines shallow. They need to bury the power lines 6+ feet down in the ground to shield everybody around them from the electromagnetic fields that they generate. They don't want to talk about it, but we should be aware that it's there. And if you have predispositions for any of these type illnesses, it could exaggerate it and make it come forth much quicker. What can we do about this? Well, protective measures. Number one, get an EMF meter and see what kind of environment you're really in. They're available at Amazon, eBay, etc. Now this one, you probably would not have thought about. You have power lines in your home. These power lines aren't strung up by poles, but they're still power lines. And if they have loads on it that draw current, they're creating magnetic fields. When you're asleep, you're probably most susceptible to changes in molecular structure. So in your bedrooms especially, turn off the power breaker to your bedroom. That way, none of this electromagnetic energy is close to you. And remember the square law rule I just talked about. The further you are from it, the less it will affect you. So if you turn off the power lines in your bedroom and maybe leave them on in the rest of the house, you're pretty good ways away from that source of radiation. And it may not have nearly a severe effect. Always use shielded extension cords. Extension cords end up wrapped around us on our legs, on our arms, if we're using power tools connected to the power receptacles. They're right there laying on us. But if you use shielded extension cords, it significantly reduces the amount of radiation that will be absorbed by your body. And again, remember, all of this is a problem with your body absorbing the electromagnetic energy. If you can't turn off the power to your bedroom without affecting the total household, reposition your bed or bedroom such that you are the farthest away from these power lines. When possible, replace all your electronic stuff with battery operated versions. Well, that's the case with cell phones and laptops. In the case of non-laptop computer equipment, there are systems called UPSs that you can connect to that equipment and power down from the receptacle and just run on those batteries, even if it's not a laptop. Now, here's a biggie. Stop using Bluetooth headsets. Bluetooth is a very high frequency source of radiation, and you got it in your ear. Let's go back to the square law theory. The farther you are away from the radiation, the less damage it can do to you. The Bluetooth headsets are right in your ear, in your head. Do not use those things. Okay. Don't sleep next to your cell phone. Your cell phones are constantly transmitting and receiving, just like that power meter. Well, the best way to do that is either move the cell phone away from where you're sleeping or put it in airplane mode so that it doesn't transmit. Use less Wi-Fi. They've got these devices now that amplify or increase the power level of your Wi-Fi. Well, yeah, that might help you get better reception to your laptop or phones or devices that connect using Wi-Fi, but they greatly increases the amount of radiation that your body will absorb. The fluorescent lighting, the bulbs, you want to swap those out. They create what's called dirty electricity. Dirty electricity is power that is not a uniform sine wave, nice, smooth, regular power, but it's chopped all up. And by chopping it all up, you increase the frequencies of the radiation. Increasing that frequency of radiation makes it more susceptible to be absorbed by your body. Similar, those dimmers that you put in your house to raise and lower the light levels of your incandescent light bulbs, those things create very dirty electricity because they chop up the signal and greatly increase the frequency of the radiation from the 60 cycle to maybe 400 or higher cycles. The amount of radiation emitted from power lines can be quite significant, and you should look into it. However, the bigger threat is likely to be the radiation in your home and in your bedroom. So although those lines that I showed you earlier are a very significant problem, just the wires in your home can be a problem if they're in your bedroom and you sleep very close to them. It's like being wrapped in a magnetic field, and our bodies don't particularly like that. In the early 60s, I believe, they did studies with amoebas in magnetic fields, 60 cycle magnetic fields, and they found that all the amoebas growing in those fields were mutated. Okay, let's get to our favorite friend here, the cell phone. The cell phone emits electromagnetic radiation 24/7. When you're actually using it, it actually increases the amount of radiation because you're transmitting to a cell site, but it is always emitting radiation. I know you've heard of all of these shields for cell phones and that you could put this shield on and safely use your cell phone without getting much radiation. Not true. The entire cell phone radiates electromagnetic energy. There is no little antenna that you raise and lower like you do on your automobiles in the old days. The whole cell phone is an antenna. So if you put an effective shield around the cell phone, it won't work because it has no way of transmitting and receiving. The picture on the right shows those areas of our body most affected by cell phone use. And I'm sure you can guess that the central nervous system is the first. You got the thing up to your ear, right next to your brain. And depending upon the thickness of your skull, you're being directly radiated. The heart is not far away. People put these things in their shirt pockets, in their coat pockets, laying right over their heart. Well, your heart's being irradiated, and this non-ionizing radiation raises the temperature of your heart. It also has been shown that it has mood effects. Your psychological balance is off when you use cell phones a lot or keep the thing close to your brain. In the case of male reproduction, it affects the sperm count and the mobility of the sperm. Let me tell you a quick story about this electromagnetic radiation and something I experienced firsthand. In my younger day, when I had my first Corvette, I of course drove it pretty fast. I got stopped by a traffic cop who was clocking me with a radar gun. He had this radar gun sitting in his lap, and he was clocking how fast I was going. And when he stopped me, he invited me to come over to his car and look at the speed that the radar gun had tracked me at. I won't tell you how much that was. I told him, "You really sit here with this radar gun in your lap all day giving traffic tickets?" His response was, "That's my job." I said, "You should go seek a physician as soon as possible and have him test you for testicular cancer. Well, about 4 months after that, I decided I wasn't going to pay the ticket, so I went to court. When I got to court, the officer that gave me the ticket was there, and he asked the judge to dismiss the ticket because of the warning and effect that resulted. He had testicular cancer, and it was caused by that radar gun sitting in his lap. Well, I made friends with the police officer, but the judge said he didn't care. I was going to have to pay the ticket anyway. There are over 400 million cell phone subscribers now in the United States as of 2017, and I think recent numbers, it's up to 600 million cell phones. That's a lot of cell phones. Over the time that you use these cell phones, all this energy is just building up and building up and building up. There are more cell sites. And with the 5G cell sites, the energy is even higher than in the 3 and 4G cell sites. So we need to be cautious. Now, let's talk about the children. The children have thinner skulls. They're still developing. Children, even at the 5-year-old level, look at how much of that cell phone energy is penetrating their brains. That's not good, because that's heating up their neural cell. It's heating it up. Remember, cell phones create electromagnetic energy, and our body absorbs it. And that's where the problem is. And absorbing that energy through the temporal lobe in children is not good. You notice all the way to the left, the adult skull is much thicker and absorbs less. But nevertheless, it is a problem. 5G cell sites, they have a double hit. Number one, you have to have more 5G cell sites because the frequency is higher and the communication connectivity needs to be a shorter distance. And back to that square law thing, the closer you are to the source of the energy, the more harm it can do. So the 5G cell phone system is going to up the ante on how much radiation we get both from the phone and the cell site itself. Some tips on how to protect ourselves. Most people aren't going to hear most of this. Limit your cell phone calls to those that are absolutely necessary. And if you make the call and you have a smartphone, place the phone on the table, turn the speaker on, and rather than put it up to your ear. Avoid making calls in bad reception areas. You won't say, why bad reception areas? Cell phones are smart. If they have trouble making connectivity because of poor signal level, they increase the power on their own to make connection with the cell sites. So when you're in a bad reception area, you're actually radiating more energy from the phone. Put your phone on airplane mode when you're not using it, and that breaks the wireless connections. If a long conversation is in place, opt to meet them directly or go to a landline. Avoid carrying your cell phone in your pocket or anywhere on your body when it is switched on. If you're going to do that, put it in airplane mode, or put it in a satchel, or put it in your briefcase. Do not take your cell phone into the bedroom at night. If you must, keep it in airplane mode, and that's for far away from your head as possible. Choose to text instead of calling whenever possible. When you're texting, the phone's not up to your head. It's in your hands in front of you. And again, the square law theory, that reduces the amount of radiation your body absorbs. Use earphones, preferably the air tube type, but don't use the Bluetooth headsets because they put the energy directly through your ear in your head. Let's go on to another favorite subject, the microwave oven. The FCC stringently regulates the amount of radiation that can leak from a microwave oven. It's like 5 milliwatts at 2 inches away from the oven. The only real danger from the radiation from the microwave oven is when kids put their heads up to the glass window and watch the food cook. Now here's where the surprise comes in. Microwaving your food creates forms of microorganisms that our bodies are not accustomed to dealing with. You think you're just heating up the food like you put it on a flame and heat it up. No. This food is being heated with the bombardment of electromagnetic radiation known as microwaves. And these microwaves alter the composition of the food, alter the composition of its ability to be metabolized. It causes mutagenic effects to everything in the food. The minerals, the vitamins, the nutrients are modified or reduced. And it's the modified or altered that is the problem, because our bodies don't know what to do with that. This is something that it's not expecting, and it sometimes has a hard time of getting rid of. It is believed that the microwave oven is responsible for the rise in colon cancer because these foods get into the colon and they have very different composition from what the human body wants to see, and that can be a problem. It can cause cancerous growth, tumors. Prolonged eating of microwave food causes cancerous cells to increase in the human blood. That's something that people have only recently started to study. But think about all of this. The makers of microwave ovens, they don't want to hear any of this. They want you to buy microwave ovens. The people that make the foods that go into the microwave ovens, the quick meal that you pop in the microwave oven, they don't want to hear any of this. And if it becomes too prominently known that there is a serious problem, there will be lawsuits that could devastate all these industries. Again, federal law limits the amount of microwaves that can leak from the oven. So that's not the problem. The only problem with the leakage is keep the kids from putting their faces directly on the oven surface, watching the food cook. A measurement made 20 inches from an oven would be approximately 1/100th of the value measured at 2 inches from the oven. Again, the square law principle, the further you're away from the source, the lower amount of energy that your body will absorb. Recommendations. If any of this you feel could be a problem in your home or in your business or in any facility that you have to be in long periods of time, get yourself a electromagnetic intensity meter, a field intensity meter. There are all kinds of brands. They're available from all sorts, lots of sources. I usually get mine from eBay or from Amazon. It doesn't even have to be a brand new unit. You can get them from eBay sometimes for $15 or so. But make sure you get a tri-field meter. That is, it reads magnetic energy, electrical energy from those power lines, and RF energy. So you can know where you stand in your home or environment with regards to this type of electromagnetic energy health risk. Thank you for letting me present this to you today. I hope it will make you aware of health risks that you probably weren't familiar with. Back to you, Dr. Maxey. Unmute, Dr. Maxey.
Hello, thank you very much for your very astute presentation. You owe me some money. I just got some new Bluetooth earphones, and I got a brand new microwave, so I'll expect a check from you real soon. But it was very interesting that sitting in my office with my laptop on, my desktop on, my TV on, and my lights on, I'm at significant danger. And sometimes I get cold at night and I put on an electric blanket. So thank you for scaring us so much. But from a practical standpoint, with us sheltering at home and staying in to keep ourselves safe from COVID, we do have to follow some of the guidelines that you gave about staying away from electromagnetic rays. Is that correct?
That is correct. Electromagnetic energy is like any radiation. It's cumulative. So if you minimize your exposure time, you minimize the amount of energy that is absorbed by your body. And always think of this as an energy absorption problem. Absorption. If you don't absorb the energy, it doesn't bother you. But if you absorb it, it can affect organs by simply raising their temperature and not necessarily mutating them, but raising certain organ temperatures can have an effect, as you know.
Wow, this is so interesting. Michelle, are there any questions in the chat box?
Yes, there's a few questions. So I only microwave water for my tea. Does it affect water or liquids? I'm saying.
No, that is not a biological element. That's just an element. Water is H2O. There's nothing to modify in water except turn it to steam or turn it to ice. So that microwaving water, there's no effect. It just heats up the water. But if that was a vegetable or a meat or some other biological, it could generate what I call mutant elements that your body, when you eat that food, your body will not recognize, and we don't know exactly what it's going to do with it.
Okay. And then another question, how can we know if our electrical cords are properly shielded?
Well, let's see. The shielding in electrical cords is like a little braid. It's like a braid sheet wrapped around the 3 wires in the cord. Without looking at the end of the cord, it's usually the very thick cords, the very heavy cords are the shielded ones because they have an additional element in it. They have this braid of metal, of wire, that is wrapped around the others and is connected to the third line. That little round thing that goes into the plug, well, that it grounds the shield on the power side, and then on the appliance or whatever you're connected to, it grounds it. And that keeps the radiation bound inside of this shield. It's just like a braid, a metal braid. and with the 3 wires running through it. Without having the visibility to the end of the cord, it's kind of hard to tell. And I have ways I've figured that out, but I don't recommend a non-electrical person do it. I actually can figure it out with a straight pin, but I don't recommend anyone use my technique to find out if it's braided. You can open up the appliance and see, you can see the end of the braid, but yeah.
Okay. Do we have time for one more or no?
Yes.
Okay, so I personally am a fan of the cast iron skillet, but I've heard some things about that. So we have one participant that says, thank you so much for this excellent information. I'll stop using the microwave and I'll start using the cast iron skillet more. Do you have any thoughts about, is the cast iron skillet a good alternative to the microwave?
It's just what it's iron, alloy of iron. In my home, we only use one kind of cooking utensil. It's a La Creuset, and they're all iron pots, and they're coated with a plastic inside, or ceramic, excuse me, inside that keeps the food from sticking. But cast iron has been this, what everyone has used from, my great-grandmother. And there is no harm I can see from any radiation from a cast iron skillet. But I, of course, use a La Creuset because I don't like the aluminum skillets because they deteriorate and you get aluminum in the food. And I don't like those. But the iron, we need iron. Iron is a vitamin that is fairly good for us. So there is no issue with the cast iron skillet. Do as your great-grandparents did.
Thank you very much, Dr. Motley. We certainly appreciate it and want you to stick around for some questions. I'd like to recognize Ms. Tori Bailey. Is Ms. Bailey on?
Yes, I had to try to wait for them to unmute me. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Ms. Tori.
Hi, I put the
Go ahead.
affirmation.
I saw it.
If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Frederick Douglass. That is our affirmation of the day that we must heed to for the rest of our lives.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Bailey. I'd like to remind everybody that the Black Health Trust provides credible information on health disparities, health issues, and especially related to COVID-19. I want to move on with our program. I'd like to introduce my co-moderator who will introduce the next speaker, Dr. Barbara Neighbor-Stephens.
Hello again, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome back to our Sunday afternoon gathering a speaker that gave us an immense amount of information a few weeks ago. And today, I'm sure it will be the same. He is none other than Dr. Moro Salifu, who is the chief of the Division of Nephrology and director of the Kidney Transplant Program at Downstate SUNY, or SUNY Downstate. He has directed the nephrology training program there from 2001 to 2008 until he became the chief of nephrology and director of the transplant program. He is active in many professional organizations and highly regarded in the field of nephrology. However, today he's going to talk to us and with us about a subject that we need to continually revisit, because as time goes on, we're learning more and more about the COVID-19 virus. Today, he's going to talk about the mechanism of COVID infection, or in other words, how do we catch this bug? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so thank you once again. I'm going to be addressing the pathogenesis of COVID-19, and this is because the last time I spoke to this group, I got a call again from Dr. Maxey. He was requesting me to describe the paper that I discussed in the presentation, describing how the COVID-19 actually happens. So I said, okay, that's fine. I would put a presentation together, and then we can have a good discussion this afternoon. I actually enjoyed the talk by Dr. Motley. I learned a lot of stuff. It's just amazing how much we are surrounded by things that can kill us and we don't even know about it. So thank you, Dr. Motley, for that presentation. So I have a number of things I want to cover, but they are not a lot of slides. Each one of them has a specific reason. So we're going to talk about the transmission itself, how people actually, transfer it from one person to the other. And then we'll talk about the scientific basis for the face coverings and social distancing. I'm sure everybody understands why that is important, but this has been politicized right now, and some people think it doesn't make sense. Some people think it makes sense, but I'm going to show you the basis for that. Then we'll talk about the mechanism of infection. How do we actually get the infection to, damage the organs in our bodies? And then we will talk about the treatment targets and the role of angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, and then ARBs, that's the angiotensin receptor blockers. As a matter of fact, Dr. Maxey was very interested in this particular subject. I don't think we have time to go into the details, but I have some summary slides for you, and then we have some take-home points. So this is what happens when somebody coughs, okay? So when somebody coughs, there's a projectile of secretion that come out. And depending on where they settle or who gets it, then they are named according to how they are transmitted. So in contact transmission, this is direct contact with the pathogen that is coming out with the droplets. So when you have a handshake or you touch a surface that is already contaminated, you can actually, bring it to your oral cavity or your nose, and then you can do that mechanism. When we say droplet infection, we actually mean larger particles, but they could be smaller, and they could also be particles, but mostly larger particles. They cannot travel too far. The larger particles, when they come out, they actually come down very quickly. And so because of that, they don't hang around in the air too long to be able to be transported by air for long distances and then infect other people. So that's why they're called droplet. They come out and they drop immediately to the floor, and usually within 6 feet. That is what the measurement is. Then the airborne then refers to the very small particles that come out when you have this cough. The very fine particles in this area here. These fine particles are less than 5 microns in diameter. They're very small, and they actually get dehydrated from the big particles sometimes. And then they float for hours. And they can be transported by different mechanisms, including air currents, moving back and forth, can move them to very far distances. So they can stick around for more than hours, and they can go beyond 6 feet. So in terms of COVID, we're actually mostly describing the droplet transmission part of it, because COVID, it comes into these airborne particles, but they are huge particles. And then when they come out, they actually don't move too far. They drop within 1 to 3 feet. And I'm going to show a slide to that. And that is this one right here. So here is somebody who is coughing or sneezing. As a matter of fact, if you cough, the particles are actually bigger than when you sneeze. When you sneeze, the particles can be in different sizes, but they are mostly smaller size particles, and they can go long, long distances. But let's say you cough, you have large particles, we call large droplets. They just drop within 1 foot, 1 meter. Okay, that's about 3 feet. And then the intermediate droplets also come to the floor because they are heavy enough to, come down by gravity. But that's another 1 meter. So the total is about 2 meters. And that is the rationale for the 6 feet distancing that we've been talking about in the media and in the prevention methodologies by the CDC. As opposed to the smaller particles can actually travel longer distances because they are dehydrated, droplets. So you can have a big drop that comes out, but it didn't come down quick enough and got dehydrated to become a small little particle and can keep floating. or it is just a small particle that came out of the person's mouth and then just keeps floating. And these ones can go for long, long distances. Now, this is not the biggest mechanism in COVID infection. These two are the biggest mechanisms of COVID infection, just by design, the way the infection actually happens. So when the droplets come out, let's say it's contact or aerosol in the air, right? It can last up to 2 hours. In surfaces like copper, it can last also up to 2 hours, right? For the COVID-1, and then this is COVID-2 we're talking about, it's about maybe 1 hour. But cardboard, look at cardboard. It can stick in cardboard for, quite a long time, right? Maybe 3 hours, something like that. And stainless steel, it can stick in stainless steel for quite a long time too, about 5 hours. And then plastic, it can stick in plastic for like 7 hours. So when you don't clean surfaces, these droplets can stick around for a long time. And 6 hours is not a small time. Basically, you can go to work and come back to your house and still find droplets that are, infected in those surfaces. So this is very, very important. So if you look at now taking that distance for the droplets, the large droplets and the intermediate droplets into consideration, and you create two models. Let's say this is model number one, where you have people close to each other, right? And you have an infected individual in the middle. So when this infected person in the middle coughs or sneezes, if he coughs probably 3 feet, that's 1 meter. If the guy sneezes, it's probably 6 feet, right? It's going to infect all these people around him or her. So in general, about 13 people can get infected when you cough or sneeze. That's the average. One person can infect up to 12 or 13 people, okay? Based on this model here. Now, if you were to social distance and then you were able to space yourselves, by 6 feet, that the chance that somebody's going to get infected is much, much lower. And this is actually very true. This was one of the earlier graphs that New York Times published, looking at the density of people and the rates of COVID-19 infections. And there was a very, very strong correlation. And this is real time in New York City. You see that the more people that live together in a household, the more the chance of infection in those neighborhoods. I'm going to exit here and then I'll show you the slide quickly. It's a video. Just pay attention to the video, please.
Now I'm recording. Stay healthy. Great. Stay healthy. Great. Less loud. Stay healthy. Good. Are you recording? Yeah. Stay healthy. Louder. Stay healthy. Louder. Stay healthy. Nothing.
Okay. So I hope this is impressive, that if you wore a mask, you can actually prevent these droplets and aerosols from coming out of the mask. If you didn't wear a mask, all those aerosols can actually come out and go long, long distances. Now, if we were to use this principle during the pandemic, and this is the model that was published during that time, this is from the Government Accountability Office. If we followed these models, principles, and then we're able to prevent people from bringing out the secretions and contaminating surfaces and people, then you will be in this curve, this blue curve here. There will still be infection, but the infection would have been at low level and highly controlled. This is actually what we have, because the infection is not under control because of confusion in whether masks actually help or don't help, the face coverings. So the next segment is now talking about the mechanism. How does it actually get, to settle in your cells and cause the damage and all that stuff? It's the paper that we, first described in April. It got a lot of traction. At the time, it was very new to all of us. So everything was around trying to figure out what could possibly go wrong. But look at what we actually hypothesized in that time. And all of those things came up to be true, that the virus goes into the lungs, it internalizes into the cells, it gets absorbed into the cells and increase the levels of angiotensin 1 because the angiotensin 2 is consumed in the process of the binding of the virus on the ACE2 receptor. And then there is bad inflammation, very, very strong inflammation that happens subsequently. And then there is thrombus formation, and then potential destruction of the lungs as a result and other tissues. This was the hypothesis at the time, and it has stood the test of time. But the most vulnerable are the people who are mostly elderly, people with comorbidities, and this means everyone else, right? All patients with hypertension, diabetes, heart problems, lung problems, renal problems, stroke. Any comorbidity is a huge risk factor for COVID infection. And there is the economics. These lower socioeconomic groups tended to have more infections and crowding, as I already explained to you already. Now, so what happens is that, when you get the bolus of somebody coughs or sneezes, and then you get this bolus into your respiratory tree, the bigger drops actually land in your upper airway. They're unable to get into your lungs. So the mechanism of the bigger droplets is that they infect your upper respiratory tract, you get the fevers and all that stuff. You try to clear it up by, coughing them out, or you swallow it into your GI tract. And so most of the symptoms are usually upper respiratory and GI symptoms, diarrhea and that kind of stuff. If you happen to get the more smaller particles, that is the aerosols, then those aerosols can actually land directly deep into your lungs. And that is usually what causes the actual infection in the lungs. And this is how it looks like. So if this is your, lung cells deep in your lungs, if you're not lucky, and this actually got into your pneumocytes, we call them pneumocytes, you have the COVID virus here. It binds first to the ACE2 receptor. That's the ACE2 receptor right here. Now the cell will try to absorb the virus into its cytoplasm, but in doing so, it takes along with it the ACE2 receptor, right? But there's a reason why ACE2 receptors are on the cell surface. There's a reason for that. The reason for the presence of this ACE2 on the cell surface is to break down these hormones, angiotensin 1 and angiotensin 2. That's its job. Its job is to break them down, right? When you have high levels of angiotensin 1 and angiotensin 2, they actually cause the blood vessels to constrict. And sometimes that's not a good thing. Sometimes they're good, but for the most part, it's not a good thing. So the job of ACE2 is to do that, to degrade these hormones. But during COVID infections, it actually takes along with it, as it goes into the cell, the ACE2, and therefore the ACE2 on the cell surface decreases, and now you have more levels of angiotensin 1 and angiotensin 2 circulating in the vicinity of the cells, and that is not good. That then causes a lot of stuff. That causes the lung injury, causes the heart to go into spasm, the blood vessels will squeeze, and we've seen a lot of people manifest with heart attack, myocardial infarction during the COVID crisis. The vasoconstriction in other beds, like the kidney, can cause acute kidney injury, and then vascular permeability in the GI tract, the gastrointestinal tract, can also cause diarrhea and all those complications. So this hormone is very, very important in the pathogenesis of COVID, and that was the rationale for the question that Dr. Maxey was posing to me. How does it actually happen? And this is the answer. This is how it happens. ACE2 is internalized and of course taken care of. And then the reduced ACE2 level that allows these two hormones the levels to go up, and they cause very bad things. And those are the bad things. Now, the cell taking the virus itself is the mechanism to process the virus, but then that leads to intense inflammation because the virus is not supposed to be inside the cell. The presence of the virus inside the cell will trigger many, many other reactions that then leads to the intense inflammation that happens along with the infection. So in the lungs, this is what happens. This is part of our publication. It comes, the COVID virus comes, and then it lands in the one of the epithelial cells. This is the ACE2 level here. ACE2 is now absorbed into the cells. Then ACE1 is triggered. Then you have all these processes that happen, but eventually what happens is that you have thrombi. The summary of it all is that you have thrombi, that is a clot inside the lung. So you have the inflammation. These are all inflammatory processes, which you don't have to go through the details. But in the end, you have inflammation and you have thrombi in the lungs. And that is the cause of the, in the beginning, we said ARDS, and everyone said, was it due to the infection or was it something else? And everybody was concerned. We are giving so much oxygen to these patients, and we're not getting the response that we are looking for. In real ARDS, you give them the oxygen, you get a response. But in the beginning, we didn't know that this was the mechanism for the ARDS. But later on, we realized that this was the mechanism, and then we started giving the blood thinners, and that actually altered the outcome. So this is the lung pathology. This is the heart. Again, in the heart, this is the blood vessel inside the heart. All right, same thing. The pathology is that the angiotensin 1 and 2 levels go up. They cause these vessels to constrict and actually damage the endothelium and causes the microthrombi to also form. And this is the mechanism of the heart attack in these patients. And some patients actually went to heart failure because there was not enough supply of blood to the heart. And then they went to heart failure and other complications. This is the effect of the virus in the kidney. Same thing. The inflammation is the same thing. You have the cytokine storm that affects every single part of the glomerulus. So you have inflammation at this level, and also within the entire kidney, interstitial level, you have inflammation. But within the vascular system of the kidney, you also have microthrombi. And that explains why a number of people, up to 20% of the people actually suffered from acute kidney injury. Some recovered and some did not recover. So if you put all that together in terms of trying to figure out, what is the overarching pathophysiology of these mechanisms. So this is what happens. You have the infection. It binds to the, that is the COVID, the SARS-CoV-2 virus. It binds to the ACE2 receptor to enter the cell inside this particular type of cell in the lungs. It also enters every single cell, endothelial cells, epithelial cells, right? It infects, in the case of kidney, it's epithelial cells. In the case of the heart, it's endothelial cells. It also enters the podocytes and then all other renal epithelial cells. Then once the infection happens, of course, you're going to develop inflammation. And these are the mechanisms of the inflammation. It also causes a strong vasoconstriction because of the decreased levels of angiotensin 2, as I explained to you, and the unopposed angiotensin 1, as I already explained. So you have vasoconstriction and then inflammation. So these two together in any bed, in any part of the body, in any organ, is just bad business. It's just not good news. Two of them almost always leads to thrombogenesis, right? And the thrombogenesis just simply means if you have the vasoconstriction and inflammation, there's sluggish flow through the microcirculation. The endothelium is already damaged, and then you have mechanisms to form thrombi. So those are the three mechanisms for the thrombogenesis. And then there is also your red blood cells are not helping because they no longer have iron, so they are unable to stay healthy. So they also begin to form different shapes and then contribute to the thrombogenesis, and then that leads to thrombosis in the lungs and every other organ. When that happens, the organ is going to suffer. In the case of the lung, it's called ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. In the case of the heart, you can get myocardial infarction or heart failure. In case of the kidney, it's going to be acute kidney injury or renal failure. And then, as all this is going, you have also repair and regeneration. Remember, a lot of the infections, 80% will actually be an acute viral syndrome. It will only be in this phase, acute viral syndrome, that would actually, go away. But 20% of the time, people will actually progress. And why they progress is probably related to the immunity of that particular individual and the number of comorbidities that individual actually has. So the more comorbidities you have, the more likelihood that you're going to progress into these pathophysiologies. But nonetheless, there is also repair and regeneration. It doesn't just damage the cells alone. There's also some degree of repair going on in addition to the injury. So we mapped out all these mechanisms and we said, okay, since we have mechanisms, then we should have interventions at each mechanism to reduce COVID-19 infection. So we outlined them in the paper. So this is a virus, so you need antiviral agents. So we named them. This is what we need to do. There was also the issue of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. There's literature support that in vitro it actually works, but we didn't know at the time whether it actually works in humans or not. Hydration, we knew for sure will work. Replacing plasma of people who have already been infected has the potential to provide the antibodies required or needed to neutralize the virus in another person. So we thought that was reasonable, and the vaccines. So where do we stand right now? Remdesivir is now approved. Hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin didn't make it. There are side effects. Hydration is what we use all the time. The convalescent plasma has also been approved, and vaccines are on the way. It's a very good mechanism. For the vasoconstriction, you can block the receptor recognition, right? We can block the receptor, or we can give, ACE2, and ACE2 is actually available. You can actually give it so that to neutralize the ACE1, or you can simply just block the pathway by the angiotensin-converting enzyme inhibitors, or ARB. And I will show you what has been done in this area. This area was the subject of actually this talk because Dr. Maxey was very interested in it. In the inflammatory area, what did we achieve so far? You see that you can suppress the inflammation with steroids, and then there is now literature support use of steroids, especially dexamethasone, to suppress the infection. There is selective interleukin-6 blocker, tocilizumab. It's now available for use. We have 2 that are actually in use right now. Then you have stem cells. Stem cells to create this repair and regeneration. We need stem cells to actually help the process and then speed up the process. But this is still in clinical studies. It hasn't made it yet. And then there are other mechanisms to prevent inflammation that are in studies that have not come up yet. Then you have to address the thrombogenesis as a mechanism. So for this, it's very straightforward. We have to, make the blood thinner so that the blood doesn't clot. So this is basically anticoagulation, right? Or you can remove the blood and give the patient new blood. This is called exchange transfusion. We have really done a lot of exchange transfusion in this COVID-19 infection, but most people will not agree that if you have a patient who's progressing rapidly to lung disease, the patient should actually be on anticoagulation. Okay, and then if the patient is not likely to suffer an organ damage like ARDS, myocardial infarction, renal failure, then specific treatments for those organs must be given. In the case of lung, it's oxygen, and then you have to put them on prone. You have to actually let them lie on their stomachs. That actually help the lungs to perfuse a little bit better. Cardiac support when needed, and dialysis for sure. We did a lot of dialysis during COVID just to keep patients alive, and a lot of them actually recovered. And then someday we will get the mesenchymal stem cells that actually use. So this is the data on the role of the angiotensin-converting enzyme inhibitors and the ARBs on COVID-19. This was a global study, huge study conducted from the United States, Europe, and in Asia. But what they found was that it actually helps. If the patient is already on angiotensin-converting enzyme inhibitors, they actually do much better compared to if they are not. This is very, very important information. But this is not a randomized, this is a retrospective review of what actually happens when patients were infected. So it's not like they're taking patients and randomizing them to angiotensin-converting enzyme inhibitors, yes or no, and then trying to figure out who did better. This is not the situation. This is looking backwards at what happened when people were on them versus not on them. And if you were on them, you actually did a little bit better than if you were not on them. So this is very, very good, right? This is very, very good. But there was another study. This study came from Italy, equally large study. They did about almost 8,000 patients as well, looking at their database and trying to figure out whether people who received angiotensin-converting enzyme inhibitors or ARBs during the pandemic actually did same or worse or better. And this is what they found. They didn't actually find anything. They didn't find all the parameters. whether it was mild disease or moderate disease. Anything that is always, crossing 1, below 1 and more than 1 means that it's not significant. Below 1, more than 1, below 1, more than 1, below 1, more than 1. All the parameters were not significant. For ACE inhibitors, below 1, more than 1, below 1, more than 1, not significant. So this study was a little bit disappointing, but it's one country, and then the global study said it was beneficial. So right now there is an ongoing trial at the NIH, but it's the home base is UC Davis. They are the ones doing the study, looking at this ACE inhibitor ramipril for the treatment of COVID-19. It's called the RAMIC trial. So hopefully we would get some results from the RAMIC trial. This is a truly randomized controlled trial. If you get COVID and you progress, if you give you ACE inhibitor, you do better compared to if we don't give you ACE inhibitor. That study, everybody's looking forward to seeing what it's going to say and how we can impact our patient population. So I will summarize by saying that there is a scientific basis for masks and social distancing. Large droplets tend to stay in the upper respiratory and GI system. The smaller droplets or aerosols tend to go deeper into the lungs. In the lungs, the SARS-CoV-2, that is the COVID-19 virus, binds to ACE2 and both get absorbed into the cells. Then the decrease in ACE2 is no longer available to break down angiotensin 2, and therefore angiotensin 2 levels go up, causing vascular injury in the lungs and in other organs. Then the vascular injury, along with the intense inflammation, the infection causes, produces thrombosis in small blood vessels. And we've seen that a lot. This was actually why it took so long to understand what it meant, ARDS in a COVID patient. We actually never understood what it meant. All patients came and they got pumped with oxygen, and yet they died. So it wasn't the true regular ARDS as you see it in somebody with pneumonia. This was actually all the blood vessels were clogged, but we didn't know at the time. The current treatments, if you wanted to summarize them, is to provide the support. And then remdesivir is now approved, plasma is now approved. The anti-inflammatory agents, steroids and tocilizumab are now available. Anticoagulants are also available. So we have good stuff. We have like 5 good things that we can do to somebody who arrives in the emergency room right now with COVID. The hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin have not shown to be effective and may actually have side effects. So if you present in the emergency room right now, any patient, we will not be recommending these 2 treatments. And then there's a lot based on the hypothesis that we generated. There's a lot more that can be discovered in the pathway to developing therapeutic for COVID-19 infection. Now, the randomized studies are needed because we really have to answer the value of ACE or ARBs, the angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors or ARBs, angiotensin receptor blockers, decrease the severity of COVID-19 infection. We are still looking forward to that study. But if the patient already came in with one of these agents, we are not going to stop it. We will continue to put the patient on as long as the blood pressure is able to tolerate it. But we will not start it if the patient was not on it already. We don't have everything to start it. All right, so in the interest of time, I didn't make this too long, so I will stop here and then we will have a discussion, and then if there are anything that I didn't touch upon, it's an opportunity to touch upon those issues. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I must make one comment before Dr. Nabor-Stevens starts the questions. They tell me that in the 1940s, when dialysis was first started, they took the very smartest cardiologists and made them the nephrologists.
Yes.
I thought that was true. Thank you so much.
His name was John Putnam Merrill. That was his name.
There you go. Who was the teacher of Eli Friedman?
That is correct.
Who you succeeded. So you have the best renal program in New York State, if not the country.
That is correct.
So just a practical question, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Nabor-Stevens. For patients who are being treated with hypertension, is it beneficial for them to continue on their ACE inhibitors or ARBs, are drugs that end in PRL or sartan. What is the word from on high?
Yes, so if the patient's already getting treatment for any indication, heart failure, hypertension with an ACE, that is angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor, or an ARB, that's the angiotensin receptor blocker, we will not stop it. Okay, the worldwide data shows that we should not stop it. We should continue it unless the patient suffers a complication, which is basically a progression of disease to hypotension. Then you cannot be giving blood pressure medication to somebody who's not going to tolerate that medication. So we will stop it in that instance. But the recommendation right now is to continue. The word is continue.
Dr. Neighbor Stephen?
Thank you, Dr. Maxey, and thank you, Dr. Salafu. You did not disappoint. We have several questions in the chat box. Michelle, would you like to read the first one, please?
Absolutely. So the first is, should mild blood thinners such as aspirin be taken immediately upon thinking illness might be COVID?
Oh, that's a very good question. We don't have evidence to show that you can prevent progression with aspirin or any other blood, oral blood thinner. But if you have been diagnosed, let's say, for instance, you had symptoms, you did your testing, and your testing turned out to be positive. You are not really sick to be in a hospital. You have to go on home quarantine, right? Under those circumstances, the answer is yes.
Is that generally being recommended? Do you know?
Well, it's not generally recommended. That's why I started by, saying that we don't have the evidence to show that it can actually prevent the progression of disease. But a lot of doctors actually in the community actually recommend it, and then we do too. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I'm going to go on to the next question. Are people with sickle cell trait and or disease at high risk of complications from COVID-19?
Well, that's a very good question too. And the answer is yes. And the reason is because every single comorbidity that we have seen so far in the literature, and there was a beautiful study in the New England Journal of Medicine looking at, they looked at all comorbidities, whether there was any relationship with COVID. And the presence of any comorbidity, including sickle cell disease, was important as a risk factor. It increased your risk a little bit of COVID infection. So the answer is yes. The answer is yes.
Okay.
Now, for people, normal, healthy adults with no comorbidity, and that's really very rare, right? That's very rare. People have a little bit of blood pressure, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, or maybe a little bit of age, But let's say you're in the 20s or whatever, young people under the age of 18, the risk is really low because of that reason. There are typically no comorbidities. And if you look at even the children who get COVID, if you actually analyze them, they actually have comorbid like obesity, childhood obesity, that kind of stuff. There's usually a comorbidity that actually comes along with the risk for infection.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Neighbor Stevens, do we have time for more?
One more, and then I think we'll need to wrap it up.
Okay. Are ACE inhibitors and ARBs a protective option for therapeutic treatment of high blood pressure?
Okay, so this one would require days and days of talking, but let me try to quote a study to solve the problem. There was a very large study, and it's on the internet, you can look at it. It's called ALLHAT, ALLHAT, ALLHAT study. The ALLHAT study was looking at the value of diuretics compared to ACE inhibitors and calcium channel blockers in treating high blood pressure and preventing stroke and other cardiovascular complications. That was the reason for the study. And then they had enough, African Americans, Black people, and they had also enough, they had enough African Americans in the study population of like 8,000 patients to be able to do subgroup analysis of what happens to African Americans in general. So this is what they found. They found out that the use of a diuretic and a calcium channel blocker was actually more useful in preventing stroke and cardiovascular disease in African Americans compared to the use of ACE. That's what the study found. So it doesn't mean you shouldn't use the ACE. It just meant that there was more benefit when we use a diuretic and a calcium channel. The blood pressure was better controlled. The risk of stroke went down. And so if that was the case, why would you use an ACE as your first line? So the first line really should be the calcium channel blocker, and then the diuretic. Now, subsequent studies came though, and then that was one of the biggest studies in African American population, just to answer that specific question. And that's also something that anyone can research. It's called the ASK study, AASK, ASK study. The ASK study conclusively said that the ACE was beneficial in African Americans to control blood pressure and also to decrease cardiovascular complications. So in my practice, I follow the ASK. So you come in, if you have diabetes, especially if you have diabetes, and then you have high blood pressure, there's no question in my mind you're going to get an ACE inhibitor, because for African Americans, and that was the only study to date. There hasn't been another repeat trial, the ASK, and it was specifically to address that question that whoever asked the question asked. And it showed that the ACE inhibitors were actually beneficial in African Americans and Black people in general.
Let me add on to that and ask you a question. There was a CAFE study.
Yes.
Which had to do with comparing what a beta blocker would do, even though it lowered blood pressure the same amount as an ACE inhibitor and a calcium channel blocker, but there was a better rate of survival, and supposedly the mechanism was there was a decrease in central aortic pressure that was a reason for that survival. Could you just elucidate that?
Yes. That was a very important observation, but they were small studies. The largest studies have not found beta blockers to actually be, we're talking about first line treatment. All the largest studies, the HOPE trial, the ASK, the ALL-HEART, and other studies that I don't have time to get to right now, all show that the beta blockers were actually third line. You could even use them second line, right? So for now, is your diuretic, your calcium channel blocker, and your ACE. Those are the competitors in terms of evidence-based decrease in strokes, decrease in cardiovascular complications, and then prolonging your life survival.
Thank you, Barbara. Dr. Neighbor.
Okay, thank you. So we are so appreciative of the information that has been shared today. And I'd like to leave you with something that I heard actually yesterday on another webinar. And this is to help you to remember the steps that you can take to help protect yourself. And it's the 3 W's. And the 3 W's are: wear a mask.
That's correct.
Wash your hands and the surfaces.
That's
and
correct.
Watch your distance. Keep your distance.
You have no choices in those 3.
Well,
Vote for them.
Thank our speakers. I'd like to know if there are any last comments you'd like to make, Dr. Motley.
No, I'll just give you my summary again. If you think you're in a high electromagnetic environment, go out and get your meter and find out.
Dr. Salafu?
I will just reiterate Dr. Stevens' comment. She just summarized my talk in one sentence. So that is beautiful. That is evidence-based. That is not somebody just saying do something. That is actually evidence-based. You know, we gotta make sure that we are cleaning our hands, we're wearing the face covering, and we are socially distancing.
Are my favorite OGs on? Reverend Smith and Reverend Robinson.
I saw them not too long ago. They may have had to jump off.
Okay. Having said that, I'd like to, are they there? I'd like to again plead that we want your support in several ways for the Black Health Trust. First of all, if you've seen this live on Facebook or any other social media, we'd like you to press the, the thumbs up button that says you like us. That's very important to us. We'd like you to spread the word to your friends and family. That's very important to us. And if you're able to, we'd like you to support us financially so we can increase our platform of knowledge. We thank you very much. Is Ms. Brenda Lee Yeager on?
She is. Yes, I'm here.
How are you? Would you give us a final thought?
Absolutely. Today's been amazing. And the thing that comes to me is we shall know the truth and the truth shall set us free. I'm grateful for the knowledge. I'm grateful for everyone who spoke today. I'm grateful for all the people on this platform and all who hears us throughout the country. We are learning. Our awareness is being raised, and it is time that we know what we know. So I'm just giving thanks for the health, the strength, the knowledge, and knowing that we're surrounded by this vast, vast spiritual realm that keeps us safe until we meet again. And let's keep learning. Thank you, doctors. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I tell a funny story, but I don't have time. So we will just keep going until the next time, and God bless us all. Keep safe, wear the mask, and then go out and vote.
Thank you. We'll be back next week, same time, with excellent speakers. For physicians and healthcare professionals on the line, we're going to have a special discussion on functional medicine and allopathic medicine on Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific, I think at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Thank you very much. Have a good night. And thank you, Dr. Nabert.
It's always my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Maxey.
Good night.
Have a great week. Be safe.
Thank you.